Welcome back to the Gen 20 podcast. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Marina.
And today we're talking about the fear of not being good enough. What does it mean to be good enough? Why do we feel compelled to reach a standard? And what about the fear of not being good enough does to us?
So this is a universal feeling, that feeling of fear about being good enough or not good enough. And it keeps us up at night. It steals joyful moments, and it definitely prevents us from taking leaps of faith, like the good kind of risks, or believing in ourselves. I know even at 29, with all of the work I've been doing on myself in the last year and last 29 years, I think about this all the time. And I catch myself saying like, oh, I don't know if I'm good enough to do this, or, oh, what if I'm not good enough? And that this has to end today, guys. We can't live like this.
Yeah, I don't think it's good for us and healthy to live in that fear. And I think it's interesting that you say it's this thought that keeps us up at night, because I actually went back and read a post that I wrote 6 years ago, almost to the day of that we're recording this, about not being good enough. And I wrote it when Gen 20 was a little smaller, a little different. It's still formatted in the old blog theme. And basically, it was just me kind of rambling about my feelings, not in an unhelpful way, but just me saying how I have this fear of not being good enough. And I wrote that post at 1 o'clock in the morning and just published it immediately. But in that post, I wrote that we are so full of expectations of ourselves that we tend to hold ourselves to impossibly high standards that we will never live up to. We hold others to standards too, but these standards are far more balanced and reasonable. We're starting to get over surrounding ourselves with people who bring us down, and that is no longer a problem. For the most part, we're proud of our friends, their accomplishments, and their life choices, even if we wouldn't choose them for ourselves. But I've been finding myself paralyzed by indecisiveness because I'm afraid that I'm not good enough and that I'm undeserving. Hey, it's Nicole.
And Marina.
And we're popping in to say that we're launching a product. The Capsule Collab is our curated box with themed collections. Check us out at thecapsulecollab.com and on Instagram at thecapsulecollab. And I think looking back at that, it's really interesting to me, at least, because I would never say to my friend, oh, you're not good enough. Not in a way that I say to myself, I would be like, you are doing amazing, fabulous, wonderful, great. I'm so proud of you, but I never say that to myself.
Yeah. If someone spoke to me the way I spoke to me, I would not be friends with them. So therefore, I should probably not be friends with me. And we got to end that too. And so what is it about being good enough? What is enough?
Yeah, I think it's kind of what I was saying before. It's I think internally a lot of us hold ourselves to these really high standards. We're we need to achieve X, we need to do Y, we need to I don't know, have dinner on the table when our husband gets home, even though it's a very antiquated way of thinking. But just things like that, where we have these standards and ideals of what quote unquote perfect is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a lot of the way that we kind of judge ourselves is we pit ourselves up against this impossible standard. Yeah, so I think when we are comparing ourselves to this standard
or measure of success, or whatever
of what we think is perfect or what we should be, that we're oh, we're not good enough. I'm not good enough to get this job. I didn't do a good enough job at this. They're not going to want to hire me because I'm not good enough at that. And it's this constant comparison to what we think we should be, and maybe even what other people are and where we're getting those ideals from.
Enough is such an arbitrary word. It's invisible. There's never enough. Enough is just kind of a fluff word to describe something without having a quantitative, objective answer. So, if you're hungry, you eat something and then you say, I've had enough when you're full. But enough pie or pizza or sandwich is going to be different from you to me. And so if I give you 3 pizzas, that's going to be too much. But maybe I can eat 3 pizzas. Obviously, this is such a good metaphor. But, what I'm trying to say is that we build these ideas in our head, maybe from what society has taught us or showed us, or because we're seeing what our older siblings or family members have done, or we're looking at what our peers are doing, and we're isolating ourselves again and measuring against everything else, which is not helpful, and it's not realistic. It's not a true answer to the questions you're asking yourself.
Yeah, I think that it's like being enough, kind of like what you're saying, is like it's not something that we can ever really be because like we are as we are. And that doesn't have to be good or bad. It just is what it is. And,
Mm-hmm.
like going, like life is not like a perfect straight line. Like I think there's those like memes of like where it's like what you think it's going to be. And it's like expectation, straight line up. The reality is just like up and down and squiggles and, circles and loop de loops and all this stuff. And that's like, it's like when we are setting ourselves up for these standards or like what we think we should be, it's not never going to look like what we think it should look like.
Exactly. You can't plan for these things either. If everything I planned for happened, my life would look extremely different. And I really like my life, so I'm glad that it doesn't look different. But I've grappled with that fear of being good enough so much that it has affected my decision making. It has prevented me from taking risks or applying to jobs or, going on those dates because I hold, you hold yourself back. I was holding myself back. And if you think about this like concept of enough because it doesn't exist, you're never going to get there. Even if you're perfect and doing everything exactly as you think you should be doing, you're never going to get there because if you say, I will be happy when I have this, by the time you get that thing, there are other factors that are making you unhappy. You can never fulfill yourself that way. And so
Mhm.
we can't worry about being something other than ourselves anymore. We just don't have the time or space to do.
Mhm. Yeah, I think this also kind of sort of pulls from like believing in ourselves. Like I think when we're in this constant state of not feeling enough or not being, I hate to keep saying enough, like but not being confident in our abilities and skills and who we are as people, it does keep us from taking risks and it kind of lowers our confidence level, which I think can kind of be this like negative feedback loop of where we aren't, pushing ourselves to do things that we want to do because we are afraid that, oh, like not gonna do well at that anyway. So what does it matter, And I think that this like one thing that we can really do to kind of help ourselves with this and like because again I wrote this post back when I was like 24 and I'm 30 now. So it's very interesting this like progression of things. Like I don't worry anymore about like not being a good enough wife or like not being a good enough mother or anything like that or good enough at my job. Like I feel a lot more confident in my skills and abilities. And I think that reframing a lot of these experiences and ideas and goals we have for ourselves is really helpful. Um, because like I think like one thing that's really hard to not do is not to compare yourself to other people. Like comparison is a thief of joy, like they say. I think it's the thief of confidence, the thief of progress, the think. Okay, I just cut that part out. Like the thief of thinking bigger for yourself and going after your own path and your own goals. And I think a lot of that can stem from social media and just constantly seeing what other people are doing and achieving all the time, but you're almost never seeing the journey of what it took to get there, which almost isn't ever like a couple months of like stress and progress and planning. It's usually years, if not decades, to get to this point. And then that person has followed their own unique path to get there. So I think just knowing that what like realizing that people are on their own paths and these paths are not just what you're seeing, they're literally like a whole life long, and that we each are bringing like our own unique talents and skills and experiences to the table. And if we were all the same and reaching the same like quote unquote perfect standard, the world would one be so boring, and two, there would be like no innovation for anything at all.
Yeah, the world would not function if we were
Yeah.
all like mini robots doing the same thing. It would be the worst outcome of the worst dystopian novel. Like, we don't want that, guys. And this, Nicole, you said something that kind of reminded me. I always think about this when I listen to Ed Sheeran music. I don't know if he's still out big, but I love him. I remember when he first started getting popular, and I read an interview where someone said, "Oh, Ed, what does it feel like to be an overnight success?" And he said, "Overnight, I've been doing this for 10 years. It's taken
Mhm.
me 10 years to get here." And it's like, oh yeah, like behind any success is not just good luck. It's hard work, it's time, it's pain. And one of my friends said this to me recently. This whole like idea of being good enough, I think a lot of it has to do with this fear of failure or rejection, and that it'll prove something that you fear about yourself. But what if you
Mhm.
spin it on your head and you say, okay, if I'm not being rejected, I'm not failing, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm accepting myself. So if you the best example is if you're dating someone and it's not quite the right fit and they break up with you, they're not rejecting you. They're breaking up with you because you aren't a good fit, because you've stood to who you are and accepted yourself for who you are, and you don't bend to the will or the needs of the other person in a way that changes who you are. So
Mhm.
I because I'm such a what if person that I'm trying very hard to like change that frame of mind, one thing I do is when I catch myself thinking about these, like, I'm not good enough, these thoughts, I try to counterbalance it and say, like, yeah, maybe I'm not, but who cares? Like, I'm never going to be the world's greatest writer because one,
Mhm.
that's going to be different for everyone. Like, I'm never going to be, I'm never going to be something I'm not. And that's okay.
Mhm.
It's okay that I'm exactly the level of writing I am. I will continue to grow. It's okay that I'm the friend I am because I'm a pretty good friend and I'm not perfect. So I miss birthdays or I say the wrong thing when I'm trying to be supportive. But that's okay because I try my hardest to be my best self, right? So
Mhm.
if we worry more about, or not even worry, if we focus more on, am I being myself? Am I accepting myself as who I am and acting accordingly? I think we will stop worrying about the enough factor. And another thing to think about when you're comparing, if you catch yourself comparing yourself, or if you're doing something that you're worried other people will think is lame, you can't read minds. You can't know what they're thinking. If I am doing something and I'm like, oh, Nicole, like, isn't this cool? I'm going to go backpack through Europe. She might think, yeah, it's cool. She might not. But who am I to assume she's going to be against me? Like, that's not okay. And I
Mhm.
think we have to kind of check ourselves more often and ask ourselves, are we asking realistic questions? Are we letting fear drive the bus?
Mhm. Yeah, I think kind of building from that too is that we can also start normalizing more to like that it's okay to be bad at something. It's okay to be a beginner, like just because I'm 30 years old doesn't mean I have to be good at everything. Like I'm going to be completely honest with you. I am very bad at arts and crafts. Very bad.
But you're very
And
creative, and I love that.
thank you. But I am just not good at the arts and crafts, okay? Like it's not my strong suit. I'm not sure what my child is going to do when he is in elementary school and he needs help with arts and crafts because that's I don't know. Auntie Marina is going to have to come help him because
Auntie Marina will come
it's
help.
not going to be his mom or his dad. Let me tell you, his dad is worse at arts and crafts than his mom. So I don't know, but like that's okay. Like I'm not less of a mother because I can't glue some pom poms in a cute way onto some construction paper. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, I also don't have this creative mind to think of, like, cool things for him to do. Like, I don't like, some people are like, "Oh, let me give him some kitchen supplies and stuff," and I'm like, What toy can I buy for you?" Like, I'm
Yeah.
not that's not, like, how my mind works, and that's fine. Like, we're not all meant to work in the same way.
Yeah, and if we're all contributing what we're not even good at, but like what we like, then you get a more rounded perspective because your son will get the streamlined toy that you find that's like really unique and really innovative and helps him build tactile functions and technology skills.
That's right. Build me up. Thank you.
Yeah, but then you're gonna have me being like, "Hey, I foraged these graham crackers. We're gonna make some sand," and like he
Yes, and
gets
thank goodness
both.
for you. Yeah.
And like I wouldn't think about the technology. I'd be like, it's we bring so much to the table together. And kind of
Mhm.
circling back to Nicole's son and learning to do things and being a beginner. I don't think when he was learning to walk, he ever worried about whether or not he was good enough to learn to walk or if he was bad at
Mhm.
walking. He had a mission to go climb the counter and he had to be able to walk to get there. So we can take a lot out of the playbook of kids who haven't learned shame, who haven't been brought down by societal standards and lies and just
Yeah.
be
I
free.
yeah, I think it's really interesting that you bring this up because one kind of parenting technique I sort of subscribe to is not to really tell him like, "Oh, good job. That's amazing. You're so wonderful that you did this." Like, I'm like, "Wow, you drew on the paper with the blue crayon." Yeah. It's like pointing out like the action that he's doing and not saying it's good or bad. It's just saying, "Oh, you did this."
Hmm.
Like, "Oh, you put the ball down the hole." It's like describing the action versus putting these like adjectives on them where it's like good, or bad. Like I don't like to see things in that perspective. And like I think that that's maybe something I can kind of pull into my own life where I like, oh, it's like this wasn't good or bad. It's just like that's what you did.
Yeah.
This is what happened. It's not, like it doesn't have to be so black and white. It can just exist. And I think that's fine.
I definitely do that for my writing. I have to. I have to like psych myself up because I love to write. And when I'm writing, I'm always happy to be writing. And after I've finished writing, I'm always happy I wrote. But before I start, the first thought before I like am coherent is, oh, I hope this is good enough. What if no one wants to publish it? And it's like, I haven't even put a word on a page. No one wants to publish a blank page. So, like, Marina, check yourself. But also, like, so what if it's bad? Then it'll just be bad. It's okay.
Yeah.
I can keep going.
Yeah. You have a million stories in you. And it's just, deciding which one you're going to pull out.
Exactly. And this this idea that we're undeserving of things, I think comes a lot from like honestly, I think it comes a lot from like the patriarchal structure where I if I ask every single one of my friends, I have mostly female friends, but I have a couple of very close guy friends. If I ask every single friend whether or not they worried about being worth something, I promise zero of my guy friends will have ever considered whether they were worthy of a job or worthy of a relationship or worthy of happiness.
Hmm.
And it's not black and white where every man or woman thinks one way or the other, but because of the way society has structured masculine and feminine and like the like gendered careers and attributes that we bring to the table, that has left the female identifying attributes in the dust. And so like for anyone else who needed to hear it, you are inherently valuable and you're inherently deserving of exactly what you want and exactly what makes you happy. And so please stop using the word enough in your vocabulary unless it is to say that you are exactly enough. We're back with some, I want to say, listener mail or reviews that we're going to read. So this one comes from our friend Emily. Thanks, Emily. Shout out. She writes that the Gen 20 podcast is so relatable, and it's nice to know that others are going through similar experiences and struggles. It has great advice, and I love to read it. But we so appreciate your support, Emily. And if you want to hear your review read on the air, leave one. We'd love to hear what you have to say.
This has been another episode of the Gen 20 podcast. We'd love if you'd subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, bye!